All right, guys. So, if you remember a while back when we were in school, in the physical school, all right, we started talking about quadratics, and we talked about a lot of their different features. One of those main features being what we call the vertex. Okay, and the vertex is one of the most important features of a quadratic because it tells us the turning point. All right, it's kind of that focal point of where the graph starts, where it ends, where it changes direction. And so, what we're going to talk about today, right, is a form of a quadratic called vertex form. And it's called vertex form because we can specifically identify the vertex. So out here on the left, if you want to take a note here, whenever we have, let's say we have the function g of x is equal to x squared plus k, right? Before, right, we were given the graph and we looked at the features, right? But now we want to try to identify the features by looking at the equation. So whenever we add a number to the x squared, okay, this value right here is going to directly affect the y value of the quadratic. Or sorry, the y value of the vertex. Okay? So for instance, we've got a couple examples here where we have h of x is equal to x squared plus 3. Now, in the normal x squared, the vertex for f of x, the vertex equals 0, 0. Okay? But for h of x, where we have x squared plus 3, because we are adding the 3 to it, the vertex is going to be 0, 3. Okay? And so that value right there is going to affect the y value of the vertex. Okay, so for b, okay, once again, f of x, it's the same that we have over here. f of x is still going to be at 0, 0. But for j of x, okay, we're subtracting a value. So what that does to the vertex is it basically shifts it down to, right? So now the vertex is at, the y value is at 0, negative 2. Okay? So whenever we are adding something or subtracting something to the x squared, that directly affects the y value of the vertex. Okay, so now in example 2, what we're looking at, okay, is we're looking at what happens when we add or subtract a value inside the parentheses. So we're not adding it to the x squared, but we're adding or subtracting it to the x. Okay? And so what happens here is that this h, that affects the x value of the vertex. All right, we're not adding anything to the squared part, so the y value stays the same, but the h, okay, that value that we're adding in the parentheses, that's going to affect the x value. Now, a word of caution. Notice here that it's x minus h, and for the vertex, okay, I have h0, and that's because the x value is always opposite from what we see in the equation. Okay, and we have to be careful with that. Okay, so for here, for f of x, for both of these, f of x, the vertex is 0, 0. Okay, there's nothing added to the x squared, there's nothing added to the x in the parentheses, so the vertex is 0, 0. But here, for h of x, okay, where there's plus 1, the vertex is negative 1, 0. Okay, so inside the parentheses, that affects the x value. All right, so it's a negative 1, and the y value didn't change. Right. For j of x, right, we have x minus 5 in the parentheses, so this minus 5 is directly going to affect the x value of the vertex. Right, but the y is not affected because there's nothing outside. Okay. All right. So we've looked at two different examples here. We've looked at an example of how we affect the y value and how we affect the x value. Okay. So next we're going to look at an example of how we can affect both of them. All right. So if you turn the page in your workbook, all right, we're going to be on page 329. Okay, we're on page 329. All right, and so now we're going to look at what happens when we've got a whole bunch of stuff and how that affects the equation overall. All right, so let's say that I've got the equation f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Okay, so we already know about the k value. The k value affects the y value. We already know about the h value. The h affects the x value. But what about the a? Okay, the a actually does two things, all right? So that allows the a value is going to allow us to find our first point after the vertex. Okay, so what I want to do here first, okay, is we're going to find the vertex. We're going to find the axis of symmetry. Okay, and then we're going to sketch the graph. Okay, so for instance, the vertex. We know the x value is the opposite of what's in the parentheses. So I have a minus 2, so my x value is positive 2. The y value is what's added to the x squared outside of it, so that's a 1. All right, if you think way back, all right, so now what we've got here, on my coordinate graph, I'm going to go ahead and draw my x, my y axis. I'm going to plot my vertex at 2, 1. Okay, axis of symmetry. Okay, remember, axis of symmetry is the vertical line that divides the graph into 2. And we talked about in my class how the axis of symmetry is always the x value of the vertex, or it's whatever x value the line passes through. But either way, we know the axis of symmetry is the equation x equals 2. Okay, now, how do I get the graph? Okay, well, back over here, we said the a value is the first point after the vertex. Okay, well here, my a value is a negative 3. So what I'm going to do from the vertex, I'm going to go on one point from either side of the vertex, and I'm going to go down 3 on both sides, because now that's symmetrical. That gives us the first point, and we're going to draw a U-shaped graph going through all of those points. Okay? All right, and that's the graph for that quadratic. All right? Now let's take a look at B. Okay, the vertex for this one. So first, let's take the x value. Okay, it's opposite from what's in the parentheses, so it's a negative 1. The y value is the same. Okay, so let's go ahead and plot the vertex, find out where that is. Okay, that's negative 1, negative 4. Okay, the axis of symmetry is the line that goes through, and we can see that it's going through the x value of x equals negative 1. Alright, so it's x equals negative 1. And my a value, okay, notice there's no number out in front of the parentheses, okay? So what do we assume that it is? It's going to be 1. So for the graph, that means when I go right or left 1 point from the vertex, I'm going to go up 1. Okay, and we're going to draw our U-shaped graph, our parabola, going through all of those points. Okay? Alright, those are your notes for vertex form. Okay, and pay attention to the assignment that your class, that your teacher has offered you. My class, we're doing Delta Math. Some classes are doing pages in the workbook, or some are doing in Pearson.